Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, this is The Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the program, in America, housing is viewed as a luxury.
Attorney and author Maria Foscarinis argues it's time we recognize it as a basic human right.
Plus, he changed positions, hoping to lead Florida's flagship university.
But Santa Ono's story exposes deeper fault lines in American colleges.
Also, John Conyers Jr. was a civil rights trailblazer, a pivotal politician, and a defender of Detroit.
Today, his legacy unfolds through the eyes and words of his son.
And Detroit has been working to reshape its schools.
Professor Eve Ewing joins us to discuss why community history and identity must lead the way. But first, there are some people who are made for the political arena, and John Conyers Jr. was one of them. From 1965 to 2017, Conyers dedicated his life to serving all people and creating new pathways for Black Americans. He served in the Korean War and was a vocal supporter of the Civil Rights Movement and marched alongside Martin Luther King Jr. During his time in Congress, Conyers was a founding member of the Black Caucus and was instrumental in solidifying Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a federal holiday. Conyers was more than a politician, though. He was a husband and a father. He loved pop music of his day and loved the city of Detroit and its people. John Conyers died at the age of 90 in 2019. His son, John Conyers III, wrote a biography of his father. It's called My Father's House, an ode to America's longest-serving Black congressman. Joining us now is John Conyers III. John, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course, of course. So, My Father's House, an ode to America's longest-serving Black congressman. Why the title?
So I used to work in the music business. I started my professional life in the music business. And so I like, rap and metaphors. So it has three meanings. So it's my father's house, our hometown, the city of Detroit. It's the house I grew up in, and then the House of Representatives. So, yeah.
All right. So John Conyers Jr., your father, has an enormous legacy as a public servant, but perhaps less is known about him outside of that arena. Who was John Conyers that you knew?
My father was a tremendously kind and gentle person. At home, he was always teaching and more so teaching how to deal with challenges that may come. Whether that is, I talk about in the book, one of the biggest takeaways that I carry with me is he and my mother were talking and something that happened to her. And she said, "That's not fair." And my father said, fair? Who said life was fair? And so always just teaching and stressing, and it has to be in no small part because of the time that he came up in, right, and was able to ascend to the heights he ascended to, that, no matter what comes before you, you have to understand that things, again, may not always be fair, but you have to figure out how to overcome that challenge.
Yeah, I remember someone told me once, fair is something that you go to in the summer with your family and friends. It's not something that's meant for life. So I always hold on to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in the book, you do talk about your father, of course, extensively, but you talk about his love of pop music from Stevie Wonder to Aretha Franklin. How did music inspire his work in politics and in turn inspire you to go into music?
So I think, my dad obviously loved pop music, but he was super, super duper jazz guy. So I cannot come on WDET and not shout out Ed Love, right? I remember driving around and riding around in the car with him and just listening to Ed Love and going to the concert that he used to have up the road from here.
Yes.
So, music was instrumental. I think getting or having this duality of a baby boomer, borderline Gen Xer, and then having a parent from the silent generation, this breadth of musical experience from classical and jazz, and obviously Stevie Wonder on my father's side, and then getting all of the Isley Brothers and all of Motown, and then going into hip hop, all of that from my mom. Just I'm this melting pot of music through generations, through decades. So music played a very pivotal role in my upbringing.
Yeah. I love that you talked about instruments that's kind of sitting up in the house that
Mm-hmm.
you would see, which is just so inspiring to think about, just walking around and seeing an instrument there. But in chapter 1, you talk about being surrounded by memorabilia from your father's trips to Capitol Hill. What kinds of things would he bring back, or what type of things that you were surrounded by that inspired you?
I don't know if there's anything that I was surrounded by that inspired me. I didn't spend a lot of time per se, or time that stuck with me as a young person with my father. I think more of that time was with my mother's side of the family, on the west side of the city, West Chicago and Wyoming, that area, in Dexter, Linwood area. Those are places that are really seminal parts of my upbringing. So I like those types of things, or that period of my life is kind of marked by a much more rough and tumble upbringing.
Yeah, and it brings us to the perfect segue here, because in the book you talk about conversations you had with your father, mm-hmm. and saying, hey, you weren't there as mm-hmm. much as you should have been or could have been, and I missed out on a lot. What did he say to you?
The first time he didn't care. I mean, just being honest, like first time he was like, so what? You know? I think, and that's what I think with anything in life, everything is right time, right moment. One of my daily prayers is, about being able to say the right thing at the right time with the right tone, so that it's received the right way. And the first time I approached my father, it wasn't received, and I probably didn't. I know I didn't approach it the right way. The second time around, I approached him more earnestly and more thoughtfully, and we just had a quick conversation, and it was, okay, so where do we go from here? And we just kind of started us developing a relationship and a closeness in our relationship that persisted until he passed away.
Yeah. And, was it hard to approach him knowing that he was such an influential and powerful person with that type of
No,
emotion?
that was my dad. No, yeah. I was an angsty young man at the time, and, at the time I was resentful. So for me, it was,
I need answers.
I'm in my nature, I'm a confrontational person. Okay. I want all the smoke. Yeah. So whether it's especially it's my dad, this to me, he's not the guy that y'all revere. It's it's my dad, and this dude wasn't around. So what's up, bro? Mm-hmm. And that's how I approached it.
Yeah. I love that. This is the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. We're talking with John Conyers III about his new book, My Father's House, an ode to America's longest serving Black congressman. So let's shift from politics a little bit, or let's shift into politics here. What did Detroit mean to your father? What did Black Detroit mean to your father?
Oh, man, everything. I remember, I don't know if I talk about it in the book. I don't think I do. So in fairness to me, we finished this almost a year ago. Oh. So I had to turn it into my publisher and get everything out. So, and I haven't really reread, I haven't gone back to it because I'm working on 2 new books right now. So, there's a refresher on some of the things, some of the details, I should say. But, to your question, I remember asking my father, why don't you take vacations? And his answer was multiple times, where would I go? Detroit meant everything to him. If he didn't have to, he went to Haiti for, Codell's for work, and I remember going with him there. He went to South Africa. He's everywhere, right? But if it wasn't work-related travel, he wanted to be in Detroit, in his district, with his folks. Detroit meant everything to him.
I love that. And what does it mean to you?
It means, it's my hometown. It's where I get my spirit from. I think it's where I get my edge from. I would even say it's where I get some of my confrontational nature from. I shouldn't say confrontational, more so I'm just not going to take any stuff, right? I think this city has been through so much, and I think we breed a certain type of person that doesn't. We didn't run if this was a house that was on fire, we were the people that ran into the building, and we stayed, and we made sure everyone got out safely versus like, I'm out. Y'all got to find a way to get out. Like, no, that's not how Detroiters are. So Detroit means everything to me.
Yeah, I try to tell people this extra passion that I have it's just from being born and raised in the city of Detroit. That's why it might come off a little harsh to some folks every once in a while. But the foreword of your book was written by Detroit native author and activist Michael Eric Dyson. Mm-hmm. And in it, he writes he was growing up, Detroit had powerful black leaders from Coleman Young to Kenneth Cockrell Sr. to the preacher Charles Adams. For decades, there had been a demand for black leadership in Detroit. Your father, in many ways, set a benchmark for so many people here in the city of Detroit. Do you think there is that same hunger for black leadership in Detroit now?
Are you asking me this question, or is this like because this is a talking point, right, that exists? And in my book, I talk about how like everyone keeps saying Detroit needs black leadership and it's bereft of black leadership at the highest levels, but the constituency isn't telling people that it wants black leadership. Like, we have Mallory McMorrow, we have Stephanie Chang, we have Joseph McFall, we have Sri Chanadar, we have Rashida Tlaib. We got the United Nations of representation in Detroit. So for the whether it's the black establishment, whether that's Democratic establishment, prioritizing Detroit having black leadership, I'm not saying Detroit shouldn't have it. I'm just saying that the constituency, based on their vote in this democracy, is not telling you all that they want black leadership. And so maybe the approach, right, and I'm a firm believer that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So just putting a black person in office for the sake of having a black person represent black people when their values aren't aligned with the issues and needs of the people that they represent, and their values may be black, but they're aligned with whether that's corporate interests, whether that's self-interest, I don't think that doesn't serve black people. And then we know the power of incumbency. So then you put a black person in office who is not aligned with black people or poor people, or we know we have a large Latino population in Southwest Detroit, so they're not aligned with people of color. And how do we get them out? Right? Because we know that, like, especially the CBC, they're going to ride for if a black person gets in there, whether they are doing the right thing or not, they're going to ride for them. Then the Democratic Party, the D-Trip, is going to ride for them and give them money. So how do we get someone out that we don't like, that is not serving us properly, right? So, like, I think we need to be careful when we say we have to have black leadership. I think it's more beneficial to have, at least strategically, and I was a philosophy major. I love Sun Tzu, the analects of Confucius I talk about in the book is something that's very, very important to me. So strategically thinking, if you think you have a candidate that maybe shouldn't be representing you, there is on some level a desire for that candidate to stay there insofar as they know they only have such small room for error. So they're going to tread lightly, and then you find the right candidate who represents the things you want, and then you put that person up against the person that you want out. You don't just put a black person in there for the sake of having a black person because, like, you got to have it. That's not strategically sound, to me at least.
No, yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm happy that you broke that down. That was a section in the book that I really was drawn to, because when you start to talk about it, and you talked about just the different folks who hold seats right now and who represents the city of Detroit. And I just thought about it for a second, and I said, oh, this is an interesting way that the voters have been showing up and showing out and displaying who they want to lead them right now. So let's just talk about the time you were running for your father's old seat, the 13th Congressional District. You mentioned Sri Chanadar, who won the 13th District in 2022 and in 2024, defeating several black candidates yourself. So when you talk about what we just talked about, and you see certain folks who are in certain positions right now who may not align with everyone's vision, in what ways do you see us working to get some of those folks out? How do we mobilize ourselves to do it?
I think you have to assess what you value in a leadership role. I think a lot of times we talk, again, black representation for the sake of black representation is not valuable. If I can make it really, really quickly, I'll talk about my candidacy, right? Mm-hmm. I think that one of the things that happened and that was squandered by the black establishment choosing not to support me and support others, going back to 2018, not just most recently, is that when my father left office, there were so many of his peers that were there, and I grew up in that body, right? I won't divulge conversations that I had with elected officials or who said what, but I will say that, like, in the private conversations, when we're talking about like the importance of what committees, right, I wanted to be on, and talking to members of Congress about like, hey, when you get here, whatever committee you want to be on, I will, especially because we have a relationship, I'll make sure you're on my committee with me, right? Committees that freshman members don't get, right? But that we are, most people, not just black folks, most Americans are politically immature. So there's a political immaturity that exists in this city and around the country that doesn't understand, like, and black people, and this is why this book was important, is that most of us do not understand the importance of legacy and like the institutional memory that exists that is transferred from John Conyers Jr. to John Conyers III. So that even if you may think that I'm only running because my dad said run, which is not the case, because I tried to run for other positions and he didn't want me to do that, which I also talk about in the book. But like putting John Conyers III in office to take advantage of the fact that Maxine Waters, Jerry Nadler, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Debbie Dingell, you go down the list, are all still there. And they have strong feelings and affectation towards John Conyers Jr. And they've known John Conyers III since he was a boy. And so they want to show him the ropes and they want to help him be good at the job. That is not how if we have a member of Congress that represents represents part of Detroit who does not have that affectation, regardless of whether you think she's doing a good job or not, people don't feel that way towards her. That is an advantage of legacy. I'm not saying that qualifies me, but that is the benefit of legacy that I think that other folks and other groups understand. That's why you so readily and easily, aside from her qualifications, put a Debbie Dingell in office right on the heels of my Uncle John, right? Or you put 11 in office right after, a uncle or father retires. Like, that's why you do that, is that institutional memory to keep it going for not only the district, right? That's why constituents do it, but also for the business interests. But yeah.
That was one of my nuanced questions about generational wealth, generational passing down of knowledge, like you were just talking about, which is something that we'll see with the Kennedys, for example. You can throw a Kennedy name in there, and that's the example that came to my head as soon as you started to talk about this. So, and this is something that is such a difficult thing to get into, but when we talk about understanding and building this knowledge of what it means to have generational political knowledge passing down, I mean, you just talked about we have an immaturity here within the political sphere, not just within the city of Detroit, but in our entire country. So what does it look like when we start to break that down a little bit more and start to educate people, especially within the Black community, what it means to have a generational political knowledge base within a family?
Well, I think so. I think I should be clear. Part of the distrust that exists among Black folks, not just in the city of Detroit, but around the country, and quite frankly, amongst all Americans right now, is that people get into office and they are corrupt, right? And you have folks that, like, they have made their entire life on being in office, right? I have no interest in serving if I ever run for office again, I have no interest in being there forever, right? That's not a thing that I think has been, I mean, sure, I think I could be effective for a very long time. I think there's more to life, which I talk about with my dad. Like, we tried to get him to step down and do more things with life, but like that was his work. Mm-hmm. But I think that the issue comes when you have folks that you put your trust in, and then they don't do the right thing, and then their kid runs, or their nephew or their cousin, and it's like the same thing. And so there is a balance. It's not just political immaturity because they don't understand. There's also political immaturity and mistrust because of things that have happened. And that is fair. Like, it's fair, and you have to be empathetic, and you have to understand the things that all people, especially Black people, when you have a city that, went bankrupt, right? Like, you have to understand what they're faced with and challenged with, and that mistrust and why that exists.
Exactly. This is the Metro #1 on WDET Detroit Public Radio. We're talking with John Conyers III about his new book, My Father's House, an ode to America's longest-serving black congressman. And that's one of the topics we were just talking about, laced within and woven within the book. As you roll in and reading through the book, you kind of go through the past and the present in this really, really interesting way. You're bringing in statistics, you're bringing in facts, and so many other things that you're talking about. And I do want to talk a little bit more, of course, about the book. And you do write in the book, it's Black power, cultural, social, and political. It's mind-boggling. We're talking about the city of Detroit and how you're referring to it. However, its grip on Black collective wealth and Black collectivism, period, has been precarious. Detroit teeters. What do you mean by that, by Detroit teetering?
So to finish off that thought and go into this one, it's like, I think part of that distrust goes into why you can, and I think the mayor has done a tremendous job, but the reason why you can have a white mayor lead a city, the blackest city in America, is because black folks can't, like, we don't have, to the point in there, like, we don't have enough money to afford, like, we can't afford to keep losing, right? Whereas, like, other communities, like, if you look at white folks, they're not going to go vote for a black person just because a white person stole, right? That's just not going to happen. But because we have so much less wealth, we have so many fewer resources, like, we have to try, we don't have to, but we often have this sense of an air of desperation to go and, like, we need something to work. And so when I'm talking about us teetering, it is about this this sense of, like, we are on the cusp of something, and it can go either way, because, you know, on one hand, we have the ability to shape the direction through our votes, but on the other hand, we are not in these leadership positions. And a lot of the folks that look like us that are in these leadership positions or have proximity to power are more concerned with aligning with folks that do not have our best interests at heart, which goes back to my previous point about making sure we put the right people in office that have the best interests of black folks on the ground. Not black folks that have corporate jobs, not black folks that are, you know, that are lawyers, not black folks that are doctors or, you know, working in finance. I'm talking about the everyday mom and pop shop, you know, the owner of, I shouldn't shout out a specific location, but, like, the owner of the stores on Fashion Avenue, right? The little pop-up shops, the owners of the little, you know, shops in Dexterland, like, those are the folks that have to have their interests looked out for.
Mm-hmm. And just continuing on there, because you talked a little bit about just that lack of economic power, especially within the city of Detroit, and we're talking about trying to run for political positions and just trying to gain some type of foothold. There's this little portion in the book that you talk about just this gap that's growing economically for Black Americans compared to all the other Americans right now. And it's that teetering moment where if we don't course correct, we could see ourselves not having a large gap economically, catching up, maybe 30, 40 years trying to catch up to get to the same point. So let's talk a little bit about what you see there and how you write about that in the book.
I mean, just if we stay local, I think Detroit, you know, if you look at Atlanta, you look at Washington, D.C., Detroit has an opportunity, if we elect the right folks, to do something different than any other city. We have an opportunity to, you know, there's so much vacant land here. We have an opportunity to, like, get it right in a way that other places have not gotten it right. And I think the amount of wealth that can be created, the amount of improvement and investment that can be done here, there are not many other places like this in the country that are, you know, starting over, right? And you literally have basically from the beginning opportunities in a city that has been here for hundreds of years, right? That doesn't really exist in America. And so I think that is something that we should be looking at. Who is going to lead with wealth creation or opportunity creation for the least among us, that create, whether that is, skilled trade, whether that is access to capital to invest in real estate, access to education, right? Because like one thing I see that is deeply concerning is like the conversation that, a college degree is no longer important because like wealthy folks are still sending their children to college. Like they are. And college is not about, the degree is cool. College is about who you meet. Like I've been able to get my brother positions. I have been able to be successful because of people that I met in college, right? That's fundamentally why you go. You go for your degree, like sure, have a great time, party, make sure you graduate in 4 years, 5, 4.5, whatever. But like, make sure you're there so that like Bill Gates, or I should say Steve Ballmer, one of the wealthiest men in the world, is a billionaire because he was an employee. His roommate was Bill Gates. Bill Gates dropped out of school, and then he goes to work for Bill after he graduates. I say all that to say that we have an opportunity to make sure that people have similar types of opportunities here in Detroit from the standpoint of having access to all the resources, having access to leadership, and leadership investing in making sure the people that stayed here have an opportunity to be a part of its renaissance. So sorry for being long-winded.
No. Thank you so much for that. I do, we're getting down to the end of our conversation here. So I do want to talk about what's happening right now within the city of Detroit. We have an election coming up. Detroit, we got an election coming up. And I've been listening to you talk this whole time, of course, pulling from things from the book as well as pulling from what's happening right now. And I'm thinking about, just like you said, just because you have a black candidate doesn't mean that they may be the best candidate for the city of Detroit or for your area. So we have all black candidates right now running for the city of Detroit. What are your thoughts right now in the landscape, and what are you seeing?
I think I'm friends with all of them, so I want to be thoughtful in how I say this. I think one of the things that one of the attributes of a leader is knowing when to go and when not to go. The rapper Young Thug said, sometimes you have to take the assist when you're the big shot. Meaning, I was on this song TikTok. Meaning sometimes when you want to, you want to hit the game winner, but the better option is being Michael Jordan in Game 5 or Game 6 in for your 5th championship. I'm on the left elbow, and Steve Kerr, I get the double team and I pass to the right. Right? Steve Kerr hits the 3. We win a championship on our home floor. Right? We beat the Jazz for the first time. Right? That is part of leadership, and I think there are people in this race that don't understand that your time will come, but folks don't want to be patient. And I think that there are folks that are having their moment, and I hope they don't squander it. And then there are folks that I think have been leaders in one space. I don't know that they are able to. I don't know that their skills as business people leading those spaces and leading a flock, if you will. That has been masterful. I don't know if those skills are transferable, and I don't know if that they understand all of the ins and outs of what it takes to be the leader of an international city. And so I think we got folks that are qualified. I don't know who's going to make it out.
Yes, we've all been trying to figure this out ourselves as well. But before we do let you go, just thinking about the book, My Father's House, an ode to America's longest serving black congressman. There were, ups and downs within any person's political career. There are ups or downs with any person's life. What do you hope that your father's remembered for?
I hope that my father is remembered for putting the people first. Whether you look at Medicare for All, which Bernie and AOC have taken up, whether you look at reparations, which now Ayanna Pressley is leading the charge for, you look at being the first person to introduce articles of impeachment for Nixon. I hope that people remember that the things that are still being talked about today were initiated by a black man who cared about us all.
John Conyers III is the author of My Father's House, an ode to America's longest serving Black congressman. I want to say thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
I appreciate it.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM, and we'll be right back. You all stay right there.